Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. And this is the show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. Before I get started, I do want to let you know that next week I won't have an episode. I am taking a week off, but I'll be back on schedule after that. Also, in about a week and a half, which is a reason why I'm taking the week off, I will have a Kickstarter for Bi Visibility, a bisexual comic book anthology, and for the first 48 hours, there are a ton of early bird specials and discounts, so be sure to follow the page, that way you are notified when we go live. And then, of course, let me know your pick of the week in the comments below, because at the end of the episode, we showcased a viewer's pick of the week, and you have a chance to be featured. Now, jumping into this week's episode, we do have 13 comic books. So, number 13 for me was Iron Man issue 11, a book that has really descended, sadly, on my list, and honestly, I've been debating if I even want to keep this on my pull list. The last couple of issues have kind of bored me. It just hasn't really interested me, and I just don't feel like this book has been as good as its first arc, even though there's, obviously a good writer on it and also beautiful art by Cafu. I don't really like this society storyline that's going on. I don't love that the whole team is separated. I don't really know what direction this book's going on for, and then I think that's what makes it a struggle to figure out if I want it on my pull list, because there's no exciting tidbits where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see that. That's why I should be picking up this book. There really isn't any of those moments here for me, and this issue really instilled that. I didn't really have anything I was truly excited for besides maybe the Patsy Iron Man interaction, but they are not really interacting with each other because they're not together at this point. They're physically not together. So overall, I'm going to give this 2 stars. We'll see if I'm going to be continuing to pick up this series. I'm pretty disappointed to see where this has headed. So that's number 13 for me. Moving on to another book that I've been very disappointed with, and that is Marauders, issue 23. This is number 12. And Marauders, obviously, is a book I'll never drop. It's a Kitty Pryde book. I love Kitty, and I love Emma as well. And, they're not really showing too much of the team dynamic. Honestly, I actually love the opener of this book where we get to see Emma's laying in bed and say, hey, the Hellfire Gala was shit, this was my party, and it got ruined because Scarlet Witch died. And I actually really enjoyed that dialogue. And then we go off to this one-off mission, and it just feels like another filler issue. And that's been a big issue with Marauders, maybe because Jerry Dugan's also writing the actual flagship of X-Men, but I can really feel this series falter and not play with the character dynamics that are there. And what I feel like is the best about this series is that there's a really interesting team here, especially between Emma and Kitty, and we're not really seeing those emotional beats that we once were with this series, and we're getting a lot of filler issues. And overall with X-Men, I feel like we've been getting a lot of filler. Even Hellfire Gala felt like a filler. And maybe because they're trying to figure out, what is X-Men after Hickman? Is Hickman truly leaving after Inferno? Because it looks like he is. I'm pretty sure he announced he is. Or is it just a hiatus? What is going on with the X-Men? And I feel like we're really feeling that bleed through with a lot of these titles. So overall, giving that 2 stars. I also thought the artwork was just okay, very bland art style, which is why this is a little lower than some of the other books. So like I said, that is number 12, and I gave that 2 stars. Moving on to number 11, a book that you shouldn't be shocked is on the bottom, because, I'm sad to see it be on the bottom many times, and that is Sinister War, issue 3, Spider-Man. So I love Sinister War issue 1. That was the best Spider-Man issue I read from Spencer, or at least top 3, because there's been a couple of good ones. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm like, cool, Sinister War, the final act for Nick Spencer. I think it's going to be great, because it started out really well. Issue 2 kind of had the same issues I've been having with Spider-Man. Nothing's really happening. There's not a lot of movement, and it's just talking about nothing, honestly. It just really, I feel like there's just not a lot of progression. And that happens once again here. There's some interesting tidbits about how villains can't change, and you can't change the past, and how people are within themselves, which I guess kind of ties into One More Day, but definitely ties into Boomerang and Lizard and some of these other redeemed villains. But that's about it. It is very much a fighting issue of Kindred saying, hey, You want to fight Spider-Man's? Like, Spider-Man's, I'm overwhelmed. Let me have my friends to help me. So it's very much an action issue with not a lot of plot progression. As we're leading into the end of his whole entire run, you would think there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of character moments, and honestly, there really isn't. It just feels like a prolonging effort to get to the finale. Hopefully the finale is good, but I'm losing faith as these issues go on, and we're just getting a lot of bloatingness in the series. Artwork is good. I like Mark Bagley's artwork, but even so, it doesn't give me enough to wow me for this issue. So I'm giving that 2 stars, and that is number 11, I believe. Moving on to number 10, I'm sad to see this low. This book usually isn't low, but it is kind of like a one-off issue, and that is Power Rangers issue 10. Now, I will say I'm more of a fan of the Mighty Morphin series because that has to do more with the high school Power Rangers stuff, but this goes into the more cosmic side of Power Rangers, and this one really leans into it with this whole history mythology issue about I don't even remember the character's name, but the tiger character that is connected to the Omega Rangers, and kind of digging into the Omega Rangers' powers a little bit more in the mythology of that. And for me, I just wasn't interested in that character enough to get a whole one-shot, and I just want to see the Power Rangers. And again, I'm not as much of a fan of the cosmic side of things and the more mythology-building things. I do think there's times where it works, especially when it involves the character beats of the Power Rangers, and I really do believe this issue tried to do that with this other character, but it just really wasn't for me. But the artwork was good, and, looking forward to seeing where, obviously, this series goes and how this all connects to a bigger picture, which I'm sure it will. So giving that 2 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Batman Secret Files Clownhunter issue 1. I promised myself I'm going to get a lot of these Secret Files issues, and Clownhunter, is a character I always thought, since introduced, was interesting, and I thought had an interesting premise, and, I am definitely a little worried that James Tynion's leaving and has introduced all these characters, and there's not going to be much of a plan with them, and that's kind of what I got with this issue. There's not much story progression. I don't know if this is a necessary book where I feel like Huntress tied into the Batman universe a little bit more. This one's just, hey, Clownhunter's been bullied and he wants to take it out on the clown people. And obviously, reveling in the history of his parents' death, we get a little bit of that. And, he's a tougher version of any Batman sidekick. And that's really the true nature of this issue. But I thought the bullying and the school aspect was a little too cliche, and that's kind of what the whole issue felt. There wasn't any big moment where I'm like, oh my god, you should pick up this issue. Yeah, the artwork was good. I enjoyed the art. There's some good action here, but it's just the sake of being violent to be violent and have a very violent Batman character with, I don't know if there's as much of the emotional heart here as Clownhunter needs and stuff we've seen in the past with the character. The one moment I did like about this issue was Red Hood's connection with Clownhunter, but you're like, okay, where is that going to go? Will it actually continue into other series? Is this going to be like Red Hood's protege? That's super interesting, but we don't really get enough of that here. I wish the whole issue was about Red Hood and Clownhunter teaming up, because I think that would have been a more interesting story. So giving this 2.5 stars, and that was number 9. Moving on to number 8, a book that I don't want to say I got a win, but I wasn't really that excited for, and that is The Trial of Magneto, issue 1. Just like I was saying with Marauders, I feel like there's been a lot of filler within the X-Men since Hellfire Gala, and honestly, since so many titles have been launching for X-Men. I feel like there's been too many directions X-Men's been going in that there's never really been a focal point, and at least with this run, and I thought there was a big potential of that with House of X and Power of X, but it really lost its vision for me, since probably the Hellfire Gala, and honestly probably a little bit before that. I would say it probably started a little bit after X of Swords for me. And now, the big topic of how many Marvel heroes are gonna die in 1 month. We have Spider-Man who's gonna die, we have Doctor Strange who's gonna die, now we have Scarlet Witch who's gonna die. Which also kind of feels like meaningless because of how many X-Men characters have already died, come back. There's also a big narrative in the end saying, well, I'm not actually dead. And it's like, oh, okay, so why does it matter who killed you? And why are we killing off all these heroes just for shock value? It doesn't really feel like there's much story here. I don't really feel like there's much build up. If we got to see Scarlet Witch more often and not off panel, maybe this would have been a more heart-wrenching story. And I do believe there are beats here that try to do that. Like, there are moments between Scarlet Witch's loved ones who said, hey, like, you know, I wish I was there. I wish I knew who did this. But at the same time, doesn't really matter because everyone could resurrect in the end, even though they, you know, they definitely have a conversation about resurrecting Scarlet Witch and how that could work. But yeah, it just feels like death in comics. It really didn't mean anything like 5 years ago, but now with this X-Men stuff and so many heroes dying, it really, really, really doesn't mean anything. And I like more build up to a death, like a Flash Thompson death, or even Wolverine. I thought was better than some of the recent deaths here. And I'm getting fatigued already, and it hasn't really even started this journey of the deaths yet. And I also just didn't really love the narrative here. I couldn't really get into the trial aspect, the more talking heads of, oh, well, who did it? Who do we think did it? Very like Law and Order version of this book. So I don't know if I'll get the next issue. We'll see, but I wasn't too impressed with this one. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that was number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Eat the Rich, issue 1. You know, I'm a huge fan of a lot of the Boom indie books, and this one seemed up my alley. It's a girl who ends up going to this town of her boyfriends, and we find out it's a very privileged town, and there's something up with these people. Because at the end, one of the help, I believe, someone who is retiring, dies, and no one's really doing anything about it. Like, he's being murdered. So we definitely get to see this kind of separation between the working class and this privileged class. And the concept is really interesting. Honestly, I like the characters for the most part, but the artwork was a lot cartoonier than I expected for a very violent book. And then also, as much as I liked the idea of the characters, I didn't really feel the heart and soul of these characters. And that really is such a big part of wanting to get into an indie book. And the concepts felt, obviously, we've seen these concepts many times, and I feel like there are moments that could have been really powerful, but kind of felt a little cliche here, and I wish there was more organic ways that they discuss some of these really big topics. So I feel like this book has a lot of potential, but I don't know if I really fell in love with it with issue 1. So I'm gonna be definitely debating to see if I'll get issue 2 or not. So giving Eat the Rich issue 1 3 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Nocterra, issue 6. I don't know when the next issue of this book's coming out, because I do believe it's actually just coming out, October. Nope, that is the trade. So I don't know when issue 7's coming out, but this is the end of an arc. And honestly, the thing that really gets me into this book is the inner monologue. I love the idea of where were you that morning the world changed, and this idea of darkness and brightness and how they are very similar, especially to a character who was once blind. The villain itself, I don't really know if I really cared about him, and the bigger mythology stuff, I don't know if I'm totally sucked into, but I like the characters, and I liked how they got out of the situation. I love the artwork here, especially, and I thought it was a good ending. It leaves us on a good cliffhanger with the bigger villain of this story, and we'll see where issue 7 ends up going. I like this book. I still like, you know, books like American Vampire a little bit more, but the art is really good, and I think it has a lot of potential, and I hope it digs deeper into these characters, because that's really the shining moments of this book, more than the bigger mythology stuff they've been trying to explore in these past issues. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, and that is Serial, issue 6. This actually would have been a lot higher if it wasn't for like the first 10 pages, where we get to see this kind of almost silent issue of the little child finding the serial killer. And then we actually get some discussions with Zoe saying, oh, this is who the serial killer is. She's a therapist, and we find out that she works for a therapist. So I kind of wish that was in the beginning, and then we got the murder, because I just felt like it was rearranged a little weirdly, because I was reading those first 5 pages, I'm like, okay, what's going on. There's no words. I'm going through this very quickly. I want to have some answers because Serial has been a little slower. And we finally do get those answers, and I do still feel like it's a lot of the same thing every issue, but at least we are starting to dig a little deeper to the mystery. There's definitely some good character beats here as well. Artwork, as always, is really good and gritty in some ways as well for a black and white comic book. So I'm giving that 3 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Spider-Woman, issue 14. And this has been an interesting arc. I mean, it feels like a really huge arc because we're still continuing with this disease thing that's going on with the Drew family, which I'm really not that interested in, but I like the Drew family itself, which is what sucked me into this issue. We get the brother again, we get the niece again, and we get another player as well who's this kind of love interest who has similar powers to Jessica and is wrecking the family and especially wrecking the brother and controlling him. So that was interesting. But again, the disease aspect, I don't know if I care about. But I like the Jerry stuff. I like Jessica's friend from her past comics returning. There's some art issues here, like when she gets punched, like her eyes, like totally almost gets out of her head. So yeah, there's some moments where the art is maybe a little bit too exaggerated, but overall still really like the style for this book. And yeah, I have nitpicks of the overall plot. Like I said, the plot movement of this book is not my favorite, but I think the character moments really shine for this book where it kind of makes you overlook some of the plot stuff here. So overall, giving this 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, a book I guess I would say I got it when I did actually want to try, and that is Kang the Conqueror, issue 1. The reason I wanted to try this is that it seems like Marvel's definitely pushing the Fantastic Four this year a little more with a lot of their anniversary stuff. And then also, I'm a Young Avengers fan, so for Kang, you got Iron Lad as well, so I wanted to try this out. And honestly, I wasn't disappointed. I really liked the narrative of Nathan here, and how he became to become Kang and related to Kang, and how he's more human than Kang, but also Kang has elements of humanity here. I thought the artwork could have been a little stronger at points, especially his facial expressions, but overall I thought this was a very promising book about power and what it means to have power, but also how does that relate to humanity. And I really like seeing a little bit more of a gray scale for, you know, this really big Marvel villain and someone who's going to become bigger within the MCU, it seems like, as well. So I like this one. The cliffhanger doesn't make issue 2 too promising, but I like this as just a one-shot issue. I thought was really well done. I'm still curious to see where it's going to go. I do believe this is an ongoing. I don't know if this is a miniseries or not, but yeah, curious to see what the overall story is for this and why we're telling it, because it kind of feels like a prelude story to me with, you know, how did Iron Lad become who he is, but I do think there's going to be a bigger narrative for this as well. So I'm giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Radiant Black, issue 7. A really solid issue. We go back to the present storyline and not a flashback with Radiant Red. And it's really a team-building issue where we get to see our Radiant Black character learn who these people are as they try to run away from the villain and figure out who the hell the villain is. And there's a lot of random mythology that's built here. Like, you go to space and there's people attacking them. You're like, who are they? I'm guessing we're going to learn about that later. And it's really just a fun team-building issue as they don't trust each other, but they're also learning about their powers. Artwork was really good. Again, there's moments where you go to Russia and Japan, and the settings really change very rapidly, and the artist did such a good job with it, and really a lot of action here as well, and I thought it was well-paced, and just a really solid issue. I do love Radiant Black, and I can't wait to see where the series goes and how this world builds, because this one really feels like an eye-opener of the possibilities of the overall Radiant Black world. So I'm giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1. This is an obvious one for me this week, and that is Nightwing, issue 83. A lot of great things happen here. We get a bit of a resolution with Nightwing and his sister, learning that the sister is not a villain. He's like, cool. All right, we could be friends and learn a little bit about her motives. And then we go into the bigger picture and how the villains relate to the bigger picture of Dick Grayson giving all his money away and trying to help the poverty of a Bloodhaven. And I just thought the way it was told was so emotional, especially for the Bat family. You get the Bat family group text, you get a moment between Barbara and Dick Grayson, but the biggest moment was the end with Bruce saying, you know, Alfred would be proud of you. But then there's also moments of Nightwing sharing with Superman and what that means for the future of John's story. So there's a lot of character work and even plot work for the overall DC universe stuck into this issue, but doesn't feel overstuffed here. And that's something I really enjoyed about this issue. It just flowed very well. The action there's also some really good action here, some good superhero moments here as well. And it's just a really well-balanced issue as it moves along the plot, gives some good reveals, gives some good character moments. And this is what I love about comics, and I hope every comic can do, is have a balance like Nightwing has been having almost every issue and nailing. From the artwork to the scripting, this is just a perfect creative team and definitely one of my favorite books on stands right now. So definitely go check out this issue. I get that 4.5 stars, and that is my pick of the week. So in the comments below, let me know what your pick of the week was, because at the end of the episode, we discussed the viewer's pick of the week. And last week's pick was Batman 89, issue 1. And here are some comments about that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her a Dancer, and also free on Webtoon is Slice of Life. And also every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. Thanks guys. Bye.